So this has been my first year to suspect that perhaps St. Anthony didn't have all the answers, and I'm sort of coming out of the little cave of my tin can and trying to enjoy the riches of the renewed liturgy. And around Epiphany, I found myself not quite knowing what I was supposed to do in the glorious new liturgy. And I quickly realized, as I saw other people floundering and complaining online in groups about using the Office of the Hours, that I was not alone. You young whippersnappers, and YouTube tells me that about 33% of you are young whippersnappers, may not remember when Epiphany came on the 6th of January, and it was a triple mystery. The Magi came, Christ was baptized in the Jordan, and he changed water to wine at the wedding in Cana. Well, now Epiphany comes on a convenient Sunday, and the other mysteries, the baptism has a following Sunday date, and Cana comes in another Sunday. And in fact, the baptism of Jesus and the wedding at Cana don't even come within the 12 days of Christmas. And a similar confusion could happen at Candlemas, which is also often these days transferred to a Sunday. I think it's a local option thing. You know, having local options for feast days is confusing as well, because, well, that's kind of what led to the Council of Whitby, wasn't it? Anyway, as I was saying, you young whippersnappers don't, I think, know, and even sometimes us old whippersnappers, because I've avoided changes, know how great the changes in the calendar of the church have been since Vatican II. And some of us think it's not necessarily for the better, even if it is supposedly simpler, although the rubrics around Epiphany suggest that's not always true. But for centuries there have sort of been two books of Revelation, the book of Scriptures and the book of Creation. Now, the book of Creation is celebrated a lot in Scripture. I think of the first chapter of Genesis, or the first chapter of Romans, or maybe Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims the work of his hands. Day unto day conveys the message, and night unto night imparts the knowledge. No speech, no word whose voice goes unheeded. Their sound goes forth through all the earth, their message to the utmost bounds of the world. There he has placed a tent for the sun. He comes forth like a bridegroom, coming from his tent, rejoices as a champion to run his course. At one end of the heavens is the rising of the sun. To its furthest end it runs its course. There is nothing concealed from its burning heat. Well, of course, for most people in most places at most times who have been illiterate, the book of nature was the most important revelation. And we can see an understanding of that in a lot of books, such as, the Book of Kells, and lots of books of hours, in which the written word, the scriptures, are framed with images from creation. But the new calendar replaces, the times and seasons of creation, as often as not with the times and seasons of Walmart. I am happy that Google good old Google, they're so kind. They give me the option of keeping Sunday as the first day of the week. But the default calendar in what do we call it? Well, Massingtham says it's not really a culture, but in his book, The Tree of Life, that kind of sparked my making this video, suggests it's not really a culture of paganism, some people suggest, but a new secularism, something that secular meaning something happens outside of the sacred. And this, I think, is a very important distinction, because as many people besides me, people like J.R.R. Tolkien, have suggested paganism, real paganism, is prophetic of Christianity, of the coming of Christ. Secularism is prophetic of metropolis. I have friends who consider themselves serious pagans, but they transfer their maypole celebrations to a convenient Sunday. And the new church year does this more often than not, as happened with Epiphany. And Rogation days, remember the hymn, we plow the fields and scatter. Plow Monday, even Ember days, with their reminder of the times, the seasons that are connected to nature and the agricultural understanding of what our role is in the world, to till the ground. These are suppressed. I mentioned Ember days not too long ago in a video, and most people hadn't even heard of them. Massingham discusses our change in understanding of time in both a wider and more specific context. He's particularly describing the loss of the role of traditional Christianity in England, and he's a rather romantic fan of this sort of idea that there was a Celtic-based church close to nature, and well, they didn't have a whole lot of choice about living close to nature. They didn't have that little switch on the wall where they could adjust the temperature, or that little switch where they could add light. But still, we have folks like St. Giles and his deer, and Melangle and her rabbits, and Kevin and his blackbirds. And Massingham is particularly fond of the Cistercians, who were some of the first organized, shall we say, monks in the British Isles, and the Cistercians all had their own little gardens. The golden age for Massingham really was the early 17th century in England, when he thought that there was an effort to recover some of the things that had been lost. Well, you know what happened to that. Enter the Puritans. I am glad to publish this video on the feast of the Blessed Charles, King and Martyr. Massingham particularly lauds the metaphysical poets, and especially Henry Vaughan. And I think it's Vaughan, he quotes some of Vaughan, and I'll read one of his bits. Man in those early days was not all stone and earth. He sighed for Eden and would often say, "Ah, what bright days were those!" Nor was heaven cold unto him, for each day the valley or the mountain afforded visits, and still paradise lay in some green shade or fountain. Angels lie there. It's an idea that salvation is a restoration of a kind of innocence that we saw, perhaps wished for in was it Emerson, Stills, and Nash? We've got to get back to the garden. But of course, this is also the image of the resurrection in the Gospel of John, where Mary Magdalene thinks that Jesus is the gardener. In Massingham's view of English history, one of the worst catastrophes was the enclosure. And that's forced people into the cities and made them workers for the new industrial age, for the dark satanic mills that we sing about sometimes. But Massingham's view goes beyond England, and he describes the loss of creation throughout Western thought. And for Massingham, industrialization has taken command, but it is not our friend. The city of God is not a heavenly Birmingham. And it's sad, I think, in many ways, that a lot of our current politics are kind of center around the loss of our understanding of heavenly Birmingham, where we all had our nice jobs in the dark satanic mills. Although, of course, it's hard to get back to the garden. But for Massingham, the solution for the church is to get back to the earth. A reminder that we say, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." The key for our recovering our innocency is recovering our humility, our remembering that we were created, we were formed from the earth itself. Now, we, of course, are born in an age of extreme industrialism. And if there is any struggle, it seems to be, in the spirit of our age, the great struggle is between supposedly communism and capitalism. It's about who controls the industries. No one seems to want to suggest that maybe we've paid too much for the convenience of having cheap books at a click and phones that I can prop up and make videos in and send out to all the world. The great world powers seemed hell-bent on being the great Babylon of the Revelation of St. John. And it's one of the reasons I prefer the traditional forms of the daily office, which have hymns that talk about how the days, the months, the hours reflect the parts of creation. I chose this photograph because this was what came up for evening prayer the day I was planning this video, and the liturgy hours did a pretty good job that day. But the liturgy of the hours and many of the other modern offices are just as likely to have any other random hymn stuck in. The hours are not so mindful of creation, shall we say. And in this brave new world, there are an awful lot of folks who feel that life is meaningless. Depression and what do we feel? Alienation and angst and the like are supposedly at an all-time high, and it's easy to believe that, or else we think that the purpose of it all is to make the most money as possible. I mentioned in my last video, oh gosh, what's his name? The Russian, who's Soliev, I'm not pronouncing that right, I think, who laments that we have substituted a goal of our life as union with God, union with our Creator. We have substituted for that dying with the most toys, something that I'm struck by every time I order another book. it's sort of like we all live these days. We don't have a common understanding that we are creatures of God, but we are instead some kind of creators ourselves, and so we live in a kind of Rocky Horror picture show. Now, I think that the liturgy should hold fast to creation, should hold fast against secularism. And the church should help us fight against secularism. But as often as not, the church has adopted the year of Walmart, everything gets condensed and brought down to its smallest common denominator, so it's the least convenience. When we talk about the relaxed suggestions for fasting and the like, well, Massingtham reminds us, as do the Gospels. Massingtham pays great attention, and the Gospels do as well, to the humility of Jesus, born in a cave, actually. Our little manger scenes for a barn doesn't recognize that traditionally Jesus was born in a cave, a stable that wasn't itself even an artifact. It hadn't been constructed, it had just been natural. Jesus is born deep in this womb of the earth as well as the womb of Mary, and born among animals. And he is raised in a place in which nothing good can come, and as a tecton, a worker, a craftsman, someone who makes tools, not even yet a farmer. I remember a conversation I had a few years ago in Eureka Springs with some folks who discovered National Geographic television. And they said it was just as good as being there. And I said it would be better to just take a walk around in the woods that surround Eureka Springs. They said, oh, but if Jesus were born today, wouldn't he take advantage of all the great new technologies we have? And, like Mother Angelica or Fulton Sheen have a television show. And I said, well, we might consider that if Jesus had wanted to be born in the age of cable news, he could, but he didn't. The incarnation happened in a time when people still walked and talked to one another, and but here we are, and we're in this brave new world, and what can we do? I mean, I have second thoughts and doubts and wonder whether I'm to just, quit making my silly little videos. And, as often as not, I just encourage people to buy more books. My book review videos almost always get more views than the Opening My Heart videos. I might learn something from that. Be a little more humble myself, right? I was about to mention a book by Bishop Richard Williamson about the farming church, or of course Wendell Berry, who had the advantage of inheriting a farm. But some truths are self-evident, even in this brave new age of Babylonia. We don't go to New York City to be closer to our Creator. I mean, even Central Park is an artifact. And more of the reserves that we have set aside of nature are covered with signs. And living in the wild will get you arrested. Not to mention the problem of scale. I mean, I am very fortunate being able to live here in my little tin can. uh, in a small grove of firs and cedars, and part of a kind of a scrappy community. I say scrappy because most of my neighbors don't throw anything away. I kind of walk through a scrapyard on my way here every day, but it's worth it when I get here. But there's something like 8 billion folks in the world these days. Recovery is not easy, and I think we need to aim at recovering our connection to creation, our recognition that we are creatures, that perhaps Mars is not our home, or we would have been planted on Mars, so to speak. Might be a good time to reread C.S. Lewis, I don't know. But, start with the understanding that despite what the science tells us, we are creatures. Read the first chapter of Genesis as a rich stew pot of symbols and metaphors, and not be distracted by the fact that in the 19th century, all of a sudden people thought, oh, this can't be true because, who was he wrote the book about the 6 days of creation? He wasn't distracted by that silliness. And start with observing the morning and the evening, or as it says in Scripture, the evening and the morning. Now, this itself is not easy. We have centralized time and standardized time, and we have to be at work at a time that is irrelevant to sunrise and sunset. But I don't know, when I started really taking, I don't want to say the life of faith, because that puts the onus on me. It's not all of a sudden I started believing, but I started paying attention, shall we say. I made a vow to have at least a rule of prayer that observed evening and morning, and I said that's kind of hard to do, but worthwhile. A good place to start probably is with something like shorter Christian prayer, and and pay attention to the book of creation. Eleanor Fargen wrote a hymn that you probably know, whether you're one of the young whippersnappers or the old farts like me. And she wrote it actually before she became a Christian, although she became a Christian. But she paid attention she read the book of creation. And so I want to end this video with that hymn. I think you'll know it. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rain new fall, sunlit from heaven like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where his feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. good old world out there.